What if I told you that for the first time in Starship history, a ship came back from space, landed softly in the ocean, tipped onto its side, and then simply refused to blow up? That single moment changed everything SpaceX thought they knew about bringing a Starship home, and now Flight 14 is about to become the most ambitious mission this rocket has ever attempted. Before we go 1 second further, if you feel that spark of excitement in your chest right now, do me one small favor and smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this video with one friend who still thinks rockets are supposed to explode on landing. Because trust me, what you are about to hear is worth every second. Now let me take you back to the countdown, because Flight 13 did not start smoothly. There was a small hold near the 57-minute mark, but after that little pause, everything moved like clockwork. Propellant loading finished on schedule. The clock ticked past T-minus 60 seconds without another hold. And every single person watching had their eyes locked on one thing, the engines. Because on the very first attempt, that exact moment was a disaster. Booster 20 tried to light its engines, and 4 Raptors simply refused to ignite, forcing an abort at the last possible second. And now we finally know why. SpaceX has explained that those 4 engines had a problem with their oxygen turbopumps. 2 more engines had the same fault, but somehow still managed to ignite anyway. Now, for anyone new to this, the turbopumps are the machines that push propellant into the engine at incredible speed. Each Raptor has 2 of them, one for liquid methane and one for liquid oxygen. And thank goodness those 4 engines did not ignite. Because if they had lit with only the methane pump working properly, you would have had a very fuel-heavy fireball right there on the pad. Not the kind of launch anyone wants to witness up close. We also learned something fascinating about how strict Starship is with itself. This new version of the ship can only tolerate 2 engines going out before it decides to abort on the pad. That is it. Just 2. For the older version 1 and 2 boosters, that number was 3. So the machine has actually become more careful with itself, not less. And that tells you something about how much SpaceX now values every single launch attempt. They are not willing to take chances that they used to take. After that first scrub, Booster 20 had to go back inside Megabay 1 to get 6 replacement engines. Then it went back out to the pad for what you could call a mini-test. A quick check where they spun up only the oxygen pumps on those new engines. No methane involved, no fire, no drama. Because there was no methane flowing, they did not even need to activate the detonation suppression system. It was basically a leak check, and everything came back clean. Then Thursday, July 23rd, was supposed to be the big day. Both vehicles rolled out together, stacked and ready. But the weather had other plans. What is interesting, though, is why the launch was scrubbed. SpaceX had added a new rule to their launch commit criteria this time. They needed clear enough skies for ground cameras to actually see the rocket during max Q. Why? Because they wanted to watch the heat shield in real time as the vehicle punched through maximum aerodynamic pressure. And with heavy clouds covering the sky that day, that just was not going to happen. So they waited. But here's the truly surprising thing SpaceX quietly revealed during that third attempt broadcast. Starship is now cleared to launch through lightning. Yes, you heard that right. Lightning. The shift came after a Chinese Long March 3B rocket was actually hit by lightning on its way to space and still completed its mission without any problems at all. That single event apparently opened the door for SpaceX to say, if that rocket can handle it, so can ours. And that is a huge change, because on Flight 10, they scrubbed the launch just for anvil clouds and storm activity nearby. Those of us used to Florida launches are very familiar with that kind of caution. But now, in South Texas at least, lightning is no longer a deal breaker. Think about what that means for the future. If SpaceX wants to launch Starship dozens of times per year, or eventually hundreds, then they cannot afford to wait for perfect blue skies every single time. Weather in Florida especially will be a nightmare with those old rules. So loosening the lightning restriction is one small step toward making Starship the workhorse rocket Elon Musk keeps promising it will be. As long as the winds behave, we might actually see this vehicle punch through some pretty rough weather in the future. That is wild to think about. Now back to the countdown. About 10 seconds before liftoff, the deluge system flooded the pad with water. All engines lit up at once, and Starship broke free from Pad 2 and roared into the South Texas sky. It was a beautiful sight. After the vehicle punched through max Q without any problems, SpaceX gave us something we had never seen before, live views from inside the booster engine bay. You could see the Raptors firing together, frost from the cryogenic fuel sitting right next to the glow of white-hot metal, all in one image. That contrast alone tells you everything about how insane this engine really is. That is the Raptor 3 in a single frame. Then came hot staging, which is still one of the coolest things this rocket does. Booster 20 shut down 28 of its 33 engines, but kept 5 burning. Ship 40 then lit its own 6 engines in a carefully timed sequence. The 2 vehicles separated cleanly. The ship kept climbing toward orbit, And for the first time ever with a version 3 booster, the lower stage flipped straight up in the air exactly as planned. It relit every single one of its 33 engines for the boost backburn. That is a huge milestone for the new hardware. The boost backburn itself looked mostly clean, but it ended a little earlier than expected. SpaceX had planned for it to last 38 seconds, but it cut off at 26 seconds. Their own website confirmed the early shutdown, but did not explain the reason yet. Still, unlike Flight 12, where Booster 19 basically hit the water at supersonic speed, Booster 20 actually managed to light most of its engines for the landing burn. It started with 10 of its 13 intended engines running, dropped to 8, then unexpectedly fell to just 5 before hitting the ocean surface hard. Not great, but not a total loss either. Hey, real quick, if this deep dive is making your brain buzz with excitement, take 3 seconds and drop a comment below with just one word: orbit. That is it. Just type orbit if you want Flight 14 to reach orbit. It helps the video massively, and I read every single comment personally. All right, back to the good stuff. That rough landing burn does mean something important for Flight 14. We probably will not see a booster catch happen this time around. The risk is simply too high after this kind of performance. It does not completely rule out a catch, but the smart money says SpaceX will play it safe and aim for another soft splashdown in the Gulf before trying to grab a booster out of the sky again. And that has consequences, because without a successful catch, Starship operations in Florida might slip even further into the future. Here is why that matters. If SpaceX could catch a booster and reuse it even one time, they would suddenly have extra production capacity. That means one booster could be shipped over to Cape Canaveral, while another one keeps launching missions from Starbase. Without a working reuse pipeline, every single Florida flight has to come from fresh production, and that pushes the timeline back. If Booster 21 sticks its ocean landing on Flight 14, then maybe Booster 22 becomes the one they try to catch. And after that, Booster 23 could finally head east to Florida. That is the hopeful roadmap. Let us talk about the ship now, because this is where things got really beautiful. On Flight 12, Ship 39 made it all the way to engine cutoff, but about 40 seconds into its ascent burn, one of the vacuum Raptor engines shut down without warning. The vehicle still reached its target trajectory, which was impressive, but that early shutdown forced SpaceX to skip other important tests, like the in-space engine relight. It was a bittersweet moment. The rocket survived, but the mission plan had to change on the fly. Ship 40 was completely different. Every engine stayed lit for the entire burn. The trajectory was perfect, and that meant every single mission objective on the list stayed on the table. But something else happened here too. Something new. At engine shutdown, the vacuum Raptors and the sea-level Raptors were cut at basically the exact same moment, not even a quarter of a second between them. That is a very different approach from earlier flights, where the vacuum engines were always shut down several seconds before the sea-level ones. Why the change? Efficiency. Pure and simple efficiency. If you can safely run every engine for as long as possible, you have more thrust fighting against gravity for longer. That means more energy in the tank, more payload capacity, more possibility. It is the same reason SpaceX now lights all 33 booster engines for the boost backburn. The more you burn, the more you can carry to orbit later. And carrying more to orbit is the entire point of building this rocket in the first place. There's a lot going on under the hood that most people never see. Yes, the hardware upgrades matter enormously. The metal, the plumbing, the heat shield tiles, all of it counts. But the software side is just as important. Every flight teaches SpaceX new things about how the engines behave, how the fuel flows, how the trajectory reacts. And every small optimization to that software squeezes out just a little bit more performance. That is how you go from carrying nothing to carrying 100 tons to orbit. One tiny improvement at a time. When Ship 40 reached the right position in space, it rotated so the PEZ dispenser was facing prograde, meaning the direction the ship was actually moving. Then it deployed all 20 Starlink version 3 satellites, one after the other. This was a huge test, because 6 of those dummy satellites were carrying cameras designed to photograph the heat shield after deployment. As of right now, we still have not seen that footage. But if SpaceX pulled it off, those images could be some of the most valuable data ever collected during a Starship flight. Fingers crossed they release the video soon, because I know I want to see it, and I know you want to see it too. And honestly, the views on this flight in general were absolutely unreal. Not just from the cameras on the ship or booster, but from every angle. This might have been the most visually stunning Starship flight so far. Every frame looked like something out of a science fiction movie, but it was real, actually happening, actually filmed live. Moments like these remind us why we fell in love with rockets in the first place. Because everything went smoothly during Ascent, Ship 40 was also able to complete the in-space engine relight test. This was a short burn that lit up a sea-level Raptor while the vehicle was moving through space. It was quick, but it was successful. And that little burn is way more important than it sounds. Being able to reliably light an engine in space is the exact thing Starship needs to do to safely leave orbit and come home. Without that relight, no true orbital mission is possible. So this test opens the door to the next major step. Elon Musk himself has already confirmed it. Unless something bad shows up in the flight data, SpaceX plans to attempt a ship catch on Flight 14. Read that again. A ship catch. Not a booster catch. A ship catch. That is enormous. We have already seen 3 successful booster catches at this point, so those look almost routine at this stage. But catching an actual ship is something that has never been done, and doing it before catching a version 3 booster would flip the whole story on its head. It would prove how far Starship has come since the rough version 2 era, when the ship was actually the weakest link in the chain. Back then, the first 3 version 2 ships all failed to complete their missions. Now the ship might be the first version 3 vehicle caught. What a comeback story. Alright, quick pause. If you are still with me this deep into the video, you are the exact kind of viewer I love. Do this one small thing for me. Click that like button one more time. Yes, even if you already liked it, click it again just to feel powerful. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is your sign. The next chapter of space history is unfolding right now, and I want you to be there with me when it happens. All right, moving on. Now, let us talk about the final phase of the flight, because this is where Ship 40 really made history. As the vehicle came screaming back through the atmosphere, it went through peak heating and started what SpaceX calls the return to launch site phase. The cross-range control was excellent. The plasma trailing off the vehicle looked absolutely stunning on the cameras. I mean, that view of pink and orange plasma dancing around the ship never, ever gets boring. It just looks like something out of a dream. Then Ship 40 did something very cool. It simulated an alignment maneuver toward an imaginary tower, using what looked like one of the fastest flat spins I have ever seen for a rocket that big. For a vehicle the size of a small building to whip around that fast in the lower atmosphere is honestly incredible to watch. In every flight I keep thinking, okay, this rocket cannot possibly surprise me anymore. And then it does, every single time. Then came the final moment. 1 hour and 5 minutes after liftoff, Ship 40 lit its sea-level engines one last time. It flipped from horizontal to vertical, dropped from 3 engines to 2, then down to just 1, and gently touched the surface of the Indian Ocean. Picture perfect. That is the only phrase for it. The landing was so smooth that it looked like the ship was simply lowering itself into a bathtub. If you have watched enough of these flights, you know how rare that kind of grace is. But here is where things got truly special. In every previous flight before this one, whenever a ship touched the water and then tipped onto its side, it exploded. Every single time. That explosion had become such a standard part of the ending that people almost started to expect it. This time, though, Ship 40 tipped over, hit the water on its side, and simply floated. No explosion, no fire, no fireball. Just a giant stainless steel rocket bobbing peacefully in the ocean. 12 hours after splashdown, Ship 40 was still floating. Even better, it was still sending data back home, even though some of its antennas were literally underwater. Then, more than 2 whole days later, satellite imagery captured by Harry Stranger showed the vehicle still there in the ocean, floating alongside a support vessel called Gorals. 56 hours after splashdown, and this rocket was still on the surface of the sea, still intact. That, my friends, is a first for Starship. The batteries inside the ship were designed to last about 48 hours. That number is not random. It matches roughly how long Starship is designed to stay in orbit before coming back home. So the batteries did exactly what they were supposed to do. Keep everything running for 2 full days after launch. Beyond that, they were on borrowed time. But by then, the vehicle had already proven every single point SpaceX needed to make. What happens next with Ship 40 is a great mystery. SpaceX has tried to recover ships intact in the past, and every single attempt has failed because the vehicles blew up before recovery teams could reach them. It really seemed like the company had quietly given up on the idea of recovering a ship after flight. But now here we are, with a fully intact ship just floating in the ocean waiting to be studied. It honestly looks like SpaceX was not fully prepared for it to survive this time. They were caught off guard by their own success. What a lovely problem to have. Hopefully, they figure out a way to bring at least some parts of Ship 40 back to Starbase. Even if the entire vehicle cannot be recovered, sections of it would be invaluable for engineering analysis. Every square inch of that heat shield, every weld, every burn mark on the metal, all of it tells a story. And if they can save enough of the ship, maybe someday it will find its way into the new rocket garden being built at Starbase. Imagine walking past the exact ship that made history right there in front of you. That would be something else entirely. Flight 13 was without a doubt one of the most memorable Starship missions we have seen so far. But if you think that was exciting, buckle up, because what comes next is going to shake the world. Flight 14 is not going to be a repeat. It is going to be a leap forward. Meanwhile, way over on the Space Coast in Florida, something interesting happened during Flight 13. The Starship tank farm at Launch Complex 39A started running tests, almost as if it thought it was the one launching. That was a fun little coincidence to watch, but it also tells us something important. Florida is inching closer and closer to being ready for Starship. The pieces are slowly coming online. In the next few months, we might actually see the first Starship vehicles arrive on the Space Coast, ready for their debut launches from that historic pad. At Launch Complex 39A, most of the recent work has been focused on the booster quick disconnect systems. SpaceX attached the middle section of the methane hood, then took it off again so workers could access the area behind it, then reattached it. That kind of back and forth work is normal during construction, but it does mean progress is happening. The tower chopsticks, which had been sitting still for over 3 years, have also finally started moving vertically for the very first time in a serious way. Yes, they were raised slightly back in June, but the recent movements have been much larger. Those chopsticks are finally starting to look like the real thing. Pad 39A is scheduled to support the first Starship launches out of Florida. Watching the site come alive after so many years of waiting is honestly emotional. From the tank farm to the chopsticks, every piece is finally being tested. It feels like a machine that has been sleeping is now yawning and stretching, ready to wake up for good. Over at Space Launch Complex 37, the first of 2 brand new launch towers just hit its full height. The 9th and final module was stacked on top, completing the tower. This is huge, because just a couple of weeks ago, this tower was still a work in progress, and suddenly, boom, it is fully stacked. That is the pace at which SpaceX now moves. Even so, the site is not ready for flights yet. There's still a mountain of work to do inside the tower, plus the flame trench needs to be excavated, the tank farm needs building, and much more. But some of that hardware is already on the way, so keep your eyes open. Back at Starbase, the pace of preparation for Flight 14 has been nothing short of relentless. Both the booster and the ship for the next mission are well into their testing programs already. Booster 21 just completed its cryogenic proof test at the Massey's test site. What that means is, engineers filled the booster with liquid nitrogen and then liquid oxygen to make sure the metal structure could handle the extreme cold and pressure without cracking or leaking. Passing that test is a major milestone. Meanwhile, Ship 41 has started getting its 6 engines installed, and once those are in place, it will move on to static fire testing. Again, with the version 3 vehicles, the boosters seem to be lagging just a bit behind the ships in the production line. You can thank Booster 18 for kicking off that pattern. But even with the lag, it should not push Flight 14 back by too much. The booster is not the only possible bottleneck, though. If Flight 14 is truly heading to orbit like SpaceX wants, they will need small updates to their FAA license. Nothing enormous, but still important. Right now, the license allows the ship to re-enter from orbit, but it only allows landing in the Indian Ocean. It does not yet allow the ship to land at Starbase. Currently, the only Starship vehicle allowed to land at the launch site is a booster, so that rule needs to be tweaked before ship catch can even be attempted. Paperwork, of all things, might be one of the biggest things standing between us and history. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. When do you expect Flight 14 to launch? Will it happen before the end of the year? Will SpaceX actually pull off a ship catch on the first try? I want to hear your predictions. So what would Flight 14 look like if everything goes according to plan? Let us walk through it. First, the booster would almost certainly need to demonstrate another clean, soft landing in the Gulf. Attempting a tower catch right now would be too risky, given the imperfect landing burn from the last mission. So no booster catch this time around, most likely. But even a good soft landing would prove the booster can do what it needs to do. Then, the ship would try to deploy version 3 Starlink satellites again, but this time it would deploy them into an actual orbit. That has never happened before. Those satellites would not join the working Starlink constellation right away, but they would give SpaceX a mountain of data about how the deployment system works in real orbital conditions. And after last time, when everything went so smoothly, hopes are high that this test will go just as well. Ship 41 might also stay in orbit for a while, up to a maximum of 48 hours according to SpaceX. That would test how well the vehicle handles the space environment for longer periods, including how the batteries hold up, how the thermal systems behave, and how the software manages a long coast. Then, when the time comes, the ship would light one of its sea-level engines to deorbit, dropping back into the atmosphere for what might become the first ever Starship re-entry aimed at Starbase itself. And if all goes perfectly, Tower 2 at Starbase would be waiting to catch it. A ship catch. Right there in Texas. Live. In front of our eyes. The pace of construction on future flight vehicles is also just as impressive. Just before Flight 13 launched, the aft section of Ship 42 was moved into Mega Bay 2. That means Ship 42 is now fully stacked and starting its assembly process. Over in Mega Bay 1, SpaceX moved the methane landing tank and the booster final aft section. right before the engine bay itself. Everything is coming together quickly. Then, right after Flight 13, Booster 22 Falcon 9 size transfer tube was rolled into Megabay 1, and one of Ship 42 flaps along with both raceways were moved into Megabay 2 to be attached. In other words, Ship 42 will soon be ready for cryogenic testing at Massey's, and Booster 22 is not far behind either. That is the beautiful thing about Starbase. It never actually sleeps. Something is always happening. Someone is always welding, testing, moving, or lifting something enormous into place. It feels less like a factory and more like a living organism that is constantly growing, evolving, and pushing the limits of what humans can build. Flight 13 was a fantastic mission. A ship that survived. A landing so soft it looked staged. A booster that ignited every engine for its boost back. New views inside the engine bay we'd never seen. And a ship floating in the Indian Ocean for days after splashdown, refusing to sink or explode. That alone is more than most rockets accomplish in their entire lifetime. But Flight 14 has a chance to be even bigger. Because Flight 14 is when SpaceX might actually pull off the first ship catch in history. Think about that. A giant stainless steel spaceship coming back from space, splitting through the atmosphere, flipping vertical, lighting its engines, and being grabbed out of the sky by giant metal arms. If that happens, the way we think about space travel will never be the same again. Rockets that fly, land, and get reused within days. That is the future SpaceX is fighting for. And that future might be just weeks away. So let me leave you with one question before this video ends. Do you think SpaceX will actually try to catch a ship on Flight 14, or will they play it safe and go for a booster catch instead? Or maybe they will surprise us all and go for both. Tell me down in the comments what you think. Read the other comments too, because the discussions there are honestly some of the most fun conversations happening in space right now. Every one of you brings something new to the table, and no matter what happens next, one thing is certain. Ship 40 changed the story. That single moment when it landed softly, tipped over, and then simply refused to explode, that was the moment Starship stopped being an experiment and started becoming a real spaceship. Everything from here on out is a step toward Mars, toward the moon, toward a future where humans travel between worlds like we travel between cities today. And you and I get to watch it happen live, in real time, from front row seats. That is what makes this journey so incredible. We are not just watching history, we are living inside it. Every flight is a new chapter, every test is a new sentence, and every explosion, every soft landing, every survived splashdown adds another line to the story of how humanity finally became a spacefaring species. So keep watching, keep dreaming. Because if Flight 13 taught us anything, it is that the impossible things we joked about last year are quietly becoming reality this year. And by next year, they will feel completely normal. That is how fast this future is arriving. See you on Flight 14.